An act of hostility demonstrates how powerful Kirtanagara felt he really was. Unfortunately for Kirtanagara, Kublai Khan wasn't the only enemy he had made, and while the Mongol fleet was making preparations, he was overthrown by a Kadiri vassal, Jayakatwang, and when the Mongols arrived, the revived Kadiri were pleased to let him know that Kirtanagara was history. The Mongols must have felt that they had sailed all that way for nothing, and then something strange happened. The son-in-law of Kirtanagara, who had his own troops and was holding out against the Kadiri, convinced the Mongols to join forces with him and topple the Kadiri, and restore the Singhasari Empire that they had set sail to destroy. The Mongols agreed, and utterly destroyed the Kadiri kingdom, most likely hoping to install a grateful leader who would be indebted to them. After many of his Mongol allies died in battle, or had succumbed to tropical diseases, Raden Vijaya turned his growing army on the Mongols and annihilated them. This revived Singhasari would be known as the Mashapahit Empire. The Mashapahit Empire would reach its height in the 1390s, and receive tribute from 98 vassal kingdoms. Around the year 1400, the Sunni Islamic Malay Sultanate of Malacca would break off from the empire, and begin to gain dominance over the Malacca Straits, that bears their name to this day. Shortly after the Malacca Sultanate was established, many smaller kingdoms converted to Sunni Islam, including the Kingdom of Brunei, which established a large empire that stretched as far north as the Kingdom of Tondo in the Philippine archipelago. As the Malacca Sultanate was still expanding and had become fabulously wealthy, the Portuguese arrived, and after being refused trade based on unfavorable reports of the Portuguese from Indian Muslims, the Portuguese returned 3 years later and sacked Malacca. With a fleet of Portuguese troops and Hindu-Indian mercenaries, the conquest of Malacca so enraged the Chinese emperor that he ordered all property from Portuguese merchants in China to be confiscated, and 2 Portuguese fleets were attacked and defeated by the Chinese in the years following the fall of Malacca. The Majapahit Empire fought a brutal civil war that left itself vulnerable to the Islamic Demak Sultanate, which overthrew the last Hindu Raja in 1527. The short-lived Sultanate of Demak played a pivotal role in the Islamization of Java and Sumatra. Many Hindus chose to migrate into the heavily forested mountains, where many of their descendants still live today, and the Hindu island kingdom of Bali. Over the course of the 16th century, the Portuguese occupied several more islands to the east of Malacca. A multitude of sultanates were established in the previous realms of the Mashapahit, Malacca, and Brunei. In 1641, the Dutch captured Malacca from the Portuguese, and by 1750, the Dutch had slowly become the hegemon throughout the region. Many initially welcomed the Dutch East India Company, who in contrast to the Portuguese did not push conversion to Catholicism or any other religion. They were only interested in the spice trade. However, widespread resentment slowly grew against the Dutch, who used violence to enforce stringent and often exploitive trade contract stipulations. In 1800, the Dutch East India Company was dissolved, and the Dutch East Indies was established as a nationalized colony of the Dutch. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th century that the Dutch control was able to spread beyond the fortresses and port cities to most of the land now encompassing modern-day Indonesia, while the British controlled the area that is now Malaysia. During World War II, the entire region fell under the control of Imperial Japan, where millions died from forced labor and starvation. Following the end of the Second World War, Indonesia declared its independence. The Dutch promptly invaded. This brutal war was brought to an end in 1949, as the Dutch succumbed to international condemnation and left the archipelago. The declining British Empire, unable to effectively manage its empire after the war, succumbed to the Malayan independence movement in 1957. By 1963, the Federation of Malaya combined with the former British colonies of North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore, forming Malaysia. Singapore would separate from Malaysia, becoming fully independent 2 years later, in 1965. East Timor would declare its independence from Portugal in 1975, and was annexed by Malaysia the following year. Its independence would be restored in 2002, after many decades of bloody conflict. Brunei gained its independence from Great Britain on January 1st, 1984. This has been Epimetheus. I hope you enjoyed this brief overview of this fascinating region's complex history. This has probably been my most requested topic to date, and I hope I did this history justice, and pronounced things adequately. Huge thanks to my patrons who help me out with the cost of running this channel. I am the writer, researcher, artist, editor, and narrator, so anything you can do to help me out is greatly appreciated. If you can't right now, that's all right. Just smash the like button, subscribe, comment below, and share with your friends. That's what keeps the channel growing.